President Putin said, I think one of the most important things of this whole press conference, it's still the root causes.
We're convinced that in order to make the settlement lasting and long-term, we need to eliminate all the primary roots, the primary causes of that conflict. And we've said it multiple times, to consider all legitimate concerns of Russia and to reinstate a just balance of security in Europe and in the world on the whole. And I agree with President Trump, as he has said today, that naturally the security of Ukraine should be ensured as well. Naturally, we are prepared to work on that. I would like to hope that the agreement that we've reached together will help us bring closer that goal and will pave the path towards peace in Ukraine. We expect that Kiev and European capitals will perceive that constructively and that they won't throw a wrench in the works. They will not make any attempts to use some backroom dealings to conduct provocations to torpedo the nascent progress.
Okay, a lot to unpack right there. Putin starts off by saying, listen, we're looking for a negotiated end. We do want this war to come to an end. And we're looking for an end state that has everybody has a chance for security, whether that's the United States, it's Russia, of course, Europe, he specifies. He even says, yes, it even includes Ukraine. So whatever end state Ukraine's going to end up looking in, he says, look, we want a deal to where everybody has security, i.e., we're not looking to just get Ukraine off the map here so we can come roll into the West and then go in after the next war. Now, of course, people will say, well, of course, he's going to say that. He's just going to say whatever he needs to in order to, to trick us all, et cetera. Nobody has to get tricked here. Nobody is going to get tricked here. Let me just be blunt on that. You already see Europe's in the midst of a rebuilding and a rearmament program. You've seen the NATO Secretary Mark Rutte talking about how we've got to get ready quick. We've got to start. Everybody's got to spend up to 5% of GDP. None of that is going to change. Nobody's going to be. It's not like as though if peace breaks out in Ukraine, that everybody in NATO is going to go, oh, okay, cool. We don't have to spend any more money. Then we can go back to the way it was. They're not going to do that. In fact, no one's going to trust Putin. No one should trust Putin. Nobody in the West should trust their national security to Putin saying something nice. Let's be clear about that. This is not about trusting anything, but this is about words do matter, and words and actions matter more. And when you see the Russians saying, look, we're looking to get this thing over with, and we're looking for an architecture that can have the thing so that everybody can live in peace. And as you're going to see subsequent comments he said in a minute, he puts even more action behind that, because one of the big elements of his travel party were business people. This is not just a foreign policy, foreign affairs, Secretary of State kind of thing, get together and like military people, et cetera. They included a lot of business people because they're looking beyond this, something that's going to actually put action behind the words that he's looking for peace and security for them. That's number one. Second thing he also said in that one there is that, look, we have an agreement. So he seems to imply that at least tentatively between Trump and Putin, he said that we have an agreement. And then he's concerned that those in Ukraine and in Europe may try and sabotage this and undercut it. And we're going to see from some of the comments Trump makes, that's probably not an unreasonable concern that he may have, but that is a concern that he has. So he's looking for an end to the war negotiation. It's going to have the root causes. So don't think this is going to be pretty for the Ukraine side. Nothing basically has changed since June of 2024, when Putin very clearly articulated exactly what it was going to take. It was reiterated at the second Istanbul meeting in July, where he had those 12-point peace plans. None of that, I'm sure, has changed. He kind of implied here, this is like we've been saying a lot. You had Sergei Lavrov saying, we're coming in to talk, and we've already been talking about this before. There's nothing new in what we're going to be talking about. So all of those terms that many in Ukraine will not like, Zelensky will hate, Europeans will hate, I got it. But that's still better than ignoring all of that and continuing to fight for the reasons that I pointed out, because that's the other thing Russia has always said, and we can only assume that it's still true. If they don't get the diplomatic solution that they're looking for here, then they'll simply continue to fight until they conquer it, however long that may take. So that was the first part there. Then and Putin says, again, he says, okay, words are important too, but you got to come through with the action.
the well-wishing and trustworthy tone of our conversation, it's important that both sides are result-oriented, and we see that the President of the U.S. has a very clear idea of what he would like to achieve. He sincerely cares about prosperity of his nation. Still, he understands that Russia has its own national interests. I expect that today's agreements will be the starting point, not only for the solution of the Ukrainian issue, but also will help us bring back business-like and pragmatic relations between Russia and the U.S.
So, like we've been talking in the last several days, the Russians are looking beyond this war. Actually, we've been talking about this for months. Russia's not just looking to, quote, conquer Ukraine. They're looking to have a diplomatic end to this, and they're looking specifically with the United States, ever since Trump came into office, about resetting relations, because Russia is going to exist no matter what. However this war comes to an end, but whether soon, later, medium, whether through negotiations or through battling out on the battlefield, Russia's still going to be there. America's still going to be there. Europe's still going to be there. So he's looking beyond this and saying, hey, we've got to figure out how to live and do something that's pragmatic and positive for both sides. It's also important, let me just point out there, because that last image, you can see it pretty quick when the camera zoomed back, is it says up there, pursuing peace, right? So that shows you that's what the Americans set up. This is on our soil here. So that is Trump's indication, her preference. He wants this to have a peaceful resolution. He's not looking to continue on and to fight the war. Putin himself is looking to have peace and to have things resolved so that the whole continent, and to include the United States as well, can at least get into some stability. Nobody has any fantasies about everybody's going to be best friends, and that the Europeans and the Ukrainians and the Russians and the Americans, everybody's going to be fine after this. They can be, over time, we can get back into a stable relationship, something that's useful and healthy and has win-win opportunities and gets the possibility of nuclear war off the table. That should animate everything that we're doing here. And hopefully, God willing, we'll get enough leaders in the West that can acknowledge the fundamentals that the war can never be won by the Ukraine side. And the longer it goes, the more of them will die and the more land they'll lose, and the worse the terms will eventually be. That should be crystal clear by now. And it seems that Putin and Trump recognize that. That's helpful. So let's go on. Now, in terms of looking beyond, and I told you a lot of the President Putin's travel party included businessmen. He spoke specifically about the business opportunities.
We have a lot of dimensions for joint work. It is clear that the U.S. and Russian investment and business potential offer each other so much in trade, digital, high-tech, and in space exploration. We see that Arctic cooperation is also very possible, and our international context, for example, between the Far East of Russia and the West Coast of the U.S. Overall, it's very important for our countries to turn the page.
It's very important, he says, to turn the page. Now, again, looking at this from the Ukrainian perspective, I know a lot of them, and anybody who's down on Russia will say, well, yeah, of course he does. He wants to get this war off the table because it's costing him so much. It's a big anchor on their economy. And I'm sure that there's elements of truth in all of that. But the fact is, the page must be turned, because to refuse that, again, I consider it to be immoral. What Ukraine and the European Union, or what the Biden administration before that were doing, whereas they refused to acknowledge and accept any kind of diplomatic off-ramp that was available, and it could have eased the Ukrainian suffering, could have lowered their casualty count, it could have minimized how much they had to pay for the conditions that were going to be left over at the end. But instead, they continued to ignore all of that and continue on. They didn't want to turn the page. In fact, they wanted the page to stay right where it was at, and they didn't seem to care, or some still don't, that the Ukrainian people are the bill payers for that abject refusal. Hopefully, President Trump will have the stamina and the courage to say, yo, y'all can all pound sand. Every one of you guys who want to keep the page where it's at, you either get on board or figure it out yourself, because we're not going to stay on the same page here, and we're not going to precipitate and participate in the continued destruction of the Ukrainian territory, land, and people. Hopefully, that's where Trump is going to go. One other thing I think is really important that Putin did say that's worth pointing out here is that he seemed to agree with Trump that had Trump been in office, then there wouldn't have been a war in the first place. And something that he says here is really important about a meeting he had with Biden in June of 2021, which I'll talk about on the backside of this. Watch this clip.
I'd like to remind you that in 2022, during the last contact with the previous administration, I tried to convince my previous American colleague that the situation should not be brought to the point of no return when it would come to hostilities. And I said it quite directly back then that it's a big mistake. Today, when President Trump is saying that if he was the president back then, there will be no war. And I'm quite sure that it would indeed be so. I can confirm that. I think that overall, me and President Trump have built a very good, business-like and trustworthy contact.
So you see President Putin there disparaging the meeting that he had prior to the breakout of the war in February 2022 with Trump's immediate predecessor, which of course is President Joe Biden. Now, I think I've mentioned here in earlier episodes a few months back that I talked to a diplomatic friend of the United States in Washington, D.C., who has some direct knowledge about the events that took place during that meeting. And in that time, the President Putin told President Biden in no uncertain terms that if NATO continues to push into Ukraine, and if Ukraine continues to have that law in the books that says they will recover all of their lost territories to include Crimea by whatever means necessary, he said, we're not going to let that happen. We will use military force to prevent that from happening. Those two things are unacceptable to us. The Minsk agreements were never put into place. The Western/Ukraine side never implemented the most important thing to us, which is limited autonomy for the Donbas and the Russian-speaking people in that area to change the constitution. They never did that. And then now then you're still pressing forward. And if you keep doing it, there's going to be conflict. And President Biden, according to my source, said, yeah, do whatever you want to do. If you try that, then we're going to sanction the hell out of your country. We're going to crush your economy, et cetera. Basically taunting Putin, saying, yeah, whatever. So Putin said, Roger that. I see. This is what we're going to do then. And we know how it turned out here. But what he's saying is if I had President Trump as a partner at the time, he says, I think we could have worked something out. And he's trying to put actions behind it and show that right now Trump is in office and perhaps the two of them can get to a place where they can bring this war to an end. So President Putin wants to get it to an end. We got to get past this deal, folks, on the Western side, that we can't, quote, let Putin win. That's already past tense. You can't undo that now. It's done. It's like you dropped an egg on the ground and it's sitting there. The yolks are all mixed up, and you say, we can't let that egg break. It's already on the ground. The shells are scattered everywhere. It's done. You can't undo it. So stop trying, because all you're going to do is get more eggs broken in the process here. So it's time to wake up for our side, because the Russians, from a position of strength, are not trying to move their strength onto the battlefield further. They could say, you know what, forget it. We tried the negotiations. We tried talking with y'all. We're not even going to try it, Trump or no Trump. And even if it takes us another year or 2 years, we're going to keep going until we destroy your country. They could say that, but they're not. They're still saying we're willing to get this thing over with negotiations. I think we have a partner in the United States that we can deal with. And for the people of Ukraine, I certainly hope they're successful. Let's shift gears now to President Trump, because he also said some interesting things. First of all, after this, he called it a good meeting.
Just to put it very quickly, I'm going to start making a few phone calls and tell them what happened. But we had an extremely productive meeting, and many points were agreed to. There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant. But we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. I would like to thank President Putin and his entire team.
So Trump says, there was many points agreed to, and there's apparently some sticking point. I'm sure he would have loved to get to some point to where the two sides could say, hey, we have agreed to this. This is a good step, because both President Trump and Putin prior to this meeting both signaled that they didn't expect this to be like a definitive summit that was going to answer all the questions, but that it was going to be a start at a process. It appears, at least in that regard, it came out like they expected it to. But President Trump says, look, we have a number of things agreed to, but there's some sticking points here. But it was still very productive, very positive. Now, in diplomatic terms, this is a good deal. This is a good meeting here, because as long as the two sides didn't break apart and move in opposite directions, or Trump come out and said, all right, I throw my hands up, I didn't get what I want, so I'm going to level more sanctions and we're not going to talk to him, or so, that would have been bad. But as many people have said, I think Winston Churchill is the one that coined it, talk is better than war. Now, unfortunately, in this case, the conflict does continue on, but as long as there are conversations and discussions, then the chance to end the war stays on the table, and the date for this war to come to an end could be moved up and shortened. And that's exactly what we're hoping for. But the devil's in the details, and President Trump was pretty honest about this and saying, I'm going to have to make some phone calls. I'm going to have to get on the phone with Zelensky. Probably by the time we're doing this video here, he's probably either on the phone with him now or may already have talked to him. We might know something on that later tonight. And then he's also going to talk to European leaders. Maybe he'll get on the phone with them all together. But whatever these issues are, he's going to try to come to a point to where he's going to say, hey, we've got to agree to this kind of stuff. We've got to get these things done here. And I think President Trump sees that there's going to be some difficulty there, and I think he's aware of how big the challenges are, not the least of which is because of the phone call he had on Wednesday before this meeting, where I'm sure all the European leaders, and we saw many of their comments afterwards, where they were emphatically telling him no territorial concessions, no bypassing security guarantees, keeping the door open for NATO, no demilitarization, no denazification. Other than that, we're in complete agreement. Obviously, those are virtually the entire opposite of everything that the Russians are pitching. So that's what they want, which is the opposite nearly of what Trump wants, because that won't end the war. That will keep the page sit there. It will not be turned. Now comes the hard part for Trump on his own side. Oddly enough, working with the Russian side is something that's more amenable, but working with our side is not. And as Trump said, until you get a deal, you got no deal.
There's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them. They're going to have to agree with what Marco and Steve and some of the great people from the Trump administration who've come here. We also have some tremendous Russian business representatives here, and I think everybody wants to deal with us. We've become the hottest country anywhere in the world in a very short period of time, and we look forward to that. We look forward to dealing.
Let's see. That's Trump talking about how he's going to have to talk all these people. He's going to have to convince them stuff. But he said, look, everybody wants to do business with us. And certainly in that regard, he's right. He's just going to have to see if he can get past the emotional baggage that the West has, that they are so stuck and so myopically focused on what we want that we're not willing to look at the bigger picture. We're not willing to look beyond today and see that it's harming all of our collective interests, as well as, of course, Ukraine's paying the biggest price on this. But Trump's going to have to try and move all them even further down the line. And he seems aware of how hard that's going to be. And he's probably in the process of finding that out right now. Now, as I said, the fact that this ended on an amiable note, that the two men agreed to have a joint press conference. Nobody just, talked negatively about the other. They didn't contradict one another, etc. And then at the very end, President Trump said, "Hey, you know what? Let's look forward to the next meeting."
Again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon, and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir. And thank you all.
That was very interesting. So Vladimir Putin responded not with the translator, but in English directly to Trump. We'll see the next one in Moscow. And the Russians had signaled even before this meeting began that they hoped that there would be subsequent meetings. And they did say that I saw actually in some of the Russian media that the idea was already floated that they would like to invite Trump into Moscow. They was also heading into this meeting. One of the things that Trump was shooting for was to be able to set the conditions for a Trump, Putin, and Zelensky meeting, because Trump even said, look, until we get Zelensky in part of this, I can't make a deal for Ukraine. I can't agree to anything for Ukraine. I can tell you what we're going to do, but I can't tell you what they're going to do. He's going to have to be here. Now, of course, that is the biggest impediment and the most difficult is going to happen is for this to happen for Zelensky because he is adamantly opposed to anything. He does not want to give anything away. He wants to keep security guarantees. He still wants to. You can call it nothing besides fiction, that he's not going to give any territorial concessions away, that they want to have some de facto or just not de jure, et cetera. But I just don't see how any of that stuff's going to fly. I don't know that Zelensky's going to agree to anything to give anything away. So I think that's probably Trump's number one biggest difficulty, even more so than the European leaders, all of them together. That may be the difficult time because for Zelensky to show up somewhere at a meeting and be able to say, wow, this is something that I'm willing to give away. It would cause a lot of angst, and there's been many people who have speculated that because of the hardcore right inside the Zelensky's bubble would be so opposed to that it's not entirely possible he would not be the victim of a coup under his own government. I don't have enough information to say whether that's valid or not, only that it seems to come from a number of different sources that is a much bigger pressure on Zelensky than many in the West seem to recognize. I can't say for sure about that, but what I can say very confidently we've seen now for 3.5 years is and actually you can go back more than actually since 2019, since he's been in office, he has just been adamant on not submitting to anything that the Russians said, not to keep war from coming in the first place, not to get it off the table in 2022, 2023, 2024, or today. He has been opposed to it, and you can speculate yourself about what the reasons may be. But what we know for a fact is that he has been unwilling to compromise on any point at all to bring this war to a conclusion. A couple of points I want to make real quick here before letting you go tonight. Just some observations. Trump really seemed tired at this. Didn't have much energy. One can imagine he's been traveling around. Certainly that was a long plane ride, and then 3 hours of probably very intense conversations. But he seems very motivated to wanting to get this over. But he really did seem kind of very low on energy at the end there, whereas Putin seemed quite energetic. He seemed quite full of energy and certainly eager to get on to the next phases on this. So hopefully they can continue to move that to get it to a new meeting and to finally to an end. One other thing that's important to point out here, Putin is, I've seen a lot of people talk about this in the last 24 hours or so. Putin is just really good at his KGB upbringing and training, and he is very famous and well known for studying the people that he talks to very, very carefully. And he knows the right language to use. He knows their pressure points. He knows what makes them happy, et cetera. And there's no doubt that he was using a lot of that, a lot of flattery and stuff. Ask Mark Rutte about flattery and how some leaders in the world use that. Ask Keir Starmer. A lot of them are good. Most leaders try to do that because they know that's something that gets Trump's motivation up. So Putin was certainly doing the same thing. You see that on Trump's own cabinet. A lot of people use that same kind of tactic. So just understand where that's coming from. So like I said earlier, we don't take Putin at his word for anything, but we do listen to his words. And when his words and his actions line up and match, and it could lead to something that's of benefit to the United States, that's something we need to pay attention to. And it is in America's interest to get this war over with quickly as possible. It's in Europe's interest to get this war over with as quickly as possible. And even though it's not in Zelensky's personal preference, it is in the interest of the Ukrainian people to get the destruction and the dying over with as soon as possible. And we certainly wish the president well. Now, I may be back to you later tonight. I'm not sure because President Trump is going to be on Sean Hannity on Fox News later tonight. And, those two are old friends, and he may give more information than he's given so far at that press conference because he didn't take any questions. So if there's anything of value on that, we may come back later tonight. Otherwise, we'll try to catch you tomorrow or the next time we have a show on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive. Thanks for being up with us late tonight. Really appreciate it. We'll see you then.